Hello, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this WISH discussion on mental health in sport. My name is Dan Walker. I'm going to be your host and your moderator for today. So what are we going to be talking about? Well, the pressure on elite athletes can be immense, but safeguarding their mental health hasn't always been top priority. Both when competing and after retirement as well, there can be, I suppose, that expectation just to get on with things. That's the way it was for such a long time. Thankfully now, top sportsmen and women have started to speak openly about some of the challenges they've faced both during their careers and since they've retired. Delighted to say that today we have three top sporting stars for you who have all competed at the top level in their respective sports. And we're also joined by respected sports psychiatrists as well, who can give us that real expert perspective on some of the topics we're going to be discussing today. Just to let you know, this event is being hosted by the World Innovation Summit for Health, which is called WISH, which is a Qatar Foundation's global health initiative. And the next edition of WISH will take place from November the 15th to November the 19th online. And you can get more information about any of the events taking part and being part of that. There's a virtual 5-day event, and you can find that at wish.org.qa. Well, today's contributors will also be answering some of your questions a little bit later. So let me introduce them to you. You'll recognise their faces, I'm sure. First up, we've got Dame Kelly Holmes, who is a double Olympic gold medal winning runner. She won both the 800 and the 1500 metres finals for Great Britain in Athens in 2004. Since retiring, she's become a leading mental health advocate, broadcaster, award-winning writer. I could go on. And she's also opened up about her very personal mental health challenges in a bid to help others. Dame Kelly Holmes, it's lovely to have you with us. Also today, we have Robbie Fowler, who, if you love your football, you'll know he is a Liverpool club legend. He actually holds the honour of being the 7th highest goal scorer in the history of the English Premier League. While he was at Liverpool, he won the FA Cup, the League Cup, the UEFA Cup, the UEFA Super Cup. And he was also capped 26 times by his country, England. Should have been a lot more than that. Maybe we'll get into that a bit later on. He's also been very open in the past about the pressures he faced as a young player, not least having to deal with missing out on playing in the World Cup in 1998 because, would you believe, he was injured just at the wrong time. Delighted to say as well today we have Wasim Akram with us, who holds the honour of being the only cricketer from Pakistan to be named as part of Wisden's all-time Test World 11 in 2013. You might know the nickname. It was a great one, the Sultan of Swing, thanks to his trademark left-arm bowling style. He too captained his country. He was a winning part of the World Cup winning side for Pakistan. That was back in 1998, and was the first bowler in the world to take 400 wickets in both Test and limited overs cricket. He became captain of Pakistan's national team when he was 29, and you might not know, he was diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 30, which forced him to deal with carrying the hopes and expectations of his countrymen while he was managing a chronic illness. I'm sure we'll get into that today. And another member of our panel, delighted to say today as well, we're joined by Professor Claudia Reardon, who specialises in sports psychiatry. She is the expert with us today. She's working out of the University of Wisconsin Athletic Department. She's also the co-chair of the International Olympic Committee's working group on mental illness in elite athletes. So she knows what she's talking about. She co-directs the IOC's diploma programme on mental health in elite sport and serves on the Behavioural Health Task Force for America's National Football League. To all of you watching from around the world, wherever you are, please feel free to post your questions and your comments at any time. If you're watching on MS Teams, this is quite important. You can click on the blue Ask a Question button, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Viewers on YouTube and Facebook, I'm sure you know how to do this as well. You can post questions in the comments sections, and we'll try and get through as many of those as we can a little bit later on. We also, how about this? We've got a sophisticated subtitles offering for you today, which we'll be working during the discussion. So if you're watching again through MS Teams, you can switch those subtitles on, and you can watch the subtitles in Arabic, in French, in English, Spanish, Italian, and Urdu. So we've tried to cover all our bases, and over the next hour, we want to try and have a really open, honest discussion with these superstars of their various sports. And we'd love to get your questions in as well. So without further ado, let's start having a chat with our panelists today. We're going to come to you, Dame Kelly Holmes, first of all, if that's all right. Since winning your double Olympic gold, you devoted a great deal of time and effort advocate for positive mental health. Was there a point in your career, Dame Kelly? Was there something that decision to speak openly about mental health?
Yes, hello everyone, first of all. Yes, it was. So I actually wrote about my own mental health, let's say at the time, situation in 2005, a year after I retired from athletics, or a year after winning 2 gold medals. The reason that I wrote it in my autobiography was a decision to make about not being classed as a superhero and actually being a human being that had a talent and never gave up on a dream. And so what happened was, at the age of 33, a year before the Olympic Games, I was in my 11th year as an international athlete, multi-medalist from all major championships. I had been serving in the military for 10 years. I retired from the military after 6. And I was training for World Championships in Paris, in France. And it was the 7th year that I'd had an injury problem, despite all the medals that I'd won. So I'd had so many highs and lows in my career. I got a niggle again, and it almost was just one too many. And I remember being in a holding camp, and basically what happened was I went into our apartment. My training partner coach was outside, and I broke down, and I had a really bad breakdown. Looked in the mirror, hated everything about myself, my body, what I was doing, letting me down. Had a dream since the age of 14 to be Olympic champion, and I never let go of that dream. And basically, that day I became a self-harmer. I picked up some scissors on the side and started to cut myself for every day I'd been injured, which at the time was a lot. And when you're only wearing crop top and shorts, there's not many places you can hide it. And it was about hiding it, because I'd never known in my network anyone that was dealing with a mental health problem. I hadn't even heard of depression, self-harm. I've been so blinkered to just me, so consumed with my dream, that came at a big shock, and I just wanted the floor to open up and jump into it. But I also had a world championship to go to. So I always describe it as half of me dying, but half of me living for the dream. And that essentially was what kept me going. And 2 weeks later, into the dark, dark time that I was in, I won a silver medal at the World Championships, and no one knew what was happening. And so in a way, it was a power of the mind, but also a destructive angle. And I didn't know how to deal with it, but all I knew is that I had to stay focused on the dream and that hope that would keep me going. So it was a pretty tough time at that time. Of course, we're talking about things that have happened since, but that was a really bad turning point. And I decided, after winning 2 gold medals for the first year and 7 that I hadn't got injured, I got the team around me. I literally said to my team, I need you to help me, but I didn't describe why. It was only about the injuries, stopping me getting injury free. Because when you've been ranked number 3 in the world for many years, yet had injuries, you know you can do it. And that's the psychology of a sports person. You know you're there. You don't accept failure, but when you get failure, you learn how to deal with it. So I decided that when I wrote my autobiography, I needed to talk about the journey to success, to give people other hope and aspirations, that even though you go through a dark time, you can still come out on top.
Well, I know, Kelly, that many people and many of your fellow athletes have really benefited from your brutally honest insight into where you were at that time and how you sort of worked through that. And Robbie, what about for you? Because I'm not sure you ever went through that sort of internal dialogue that Kelly was going through, but you burst onto the scene at one of the biggest football clubs in the world as a young man, and having to deal with that huge expectation from millions of Liverpool fans all around the world, and living your life right in the glare, if you like, of the media spotlight.
Yes, I think when I started football, it was a case of, look, you get out there and you just enjoy what you're doing. And it's obviously interesting listening to Dame Kelly there, just about what she's been through and what she's had to deal with herself. And I always thought, well, I play football, I'm doing something that I love, something that I really enjoy. So I've never sort of gone into that within myself about what's right and what's wrong. I always felt I'm doing what I love. I've got a good family. I've got a good, I've got good kids who, in fact, are brilliant. So you never sort of think too deep, and I never did, because I thought, if I start coming out saying, this happened or that happened, then I think people have a different a different respect for me, if you like. But you know what you just said, Dan, is look, I played for Liverpool from a really early age. You know, made my debut at 18 years old. And bear in mind, Liverpool were a great team with lots of great players. And what happened then is, I get into the team and I just follow them. So, these are great players and I want to be like them. So I do what they're doing. We'll go out and we'll have a drink. So I maybe didn't look after myself as much as what I should have done. Something that the players do now. Because this is the only thing I knew. This is what I was watching, day in, day out. I was watching these unbelievable great players just having a drink and just felt this was the normal thing to do. And then all of a sudden, I know obviously Dame Kelly mentioned again, injuries take hold. And once you start getting one, it's hard to sort of not get others. And obviously, Wazzy and obviously Dame Kelly will tell you, once you start getting one, it's like a real knock-on effect because you're trying to sort of get one better and then all of a sudden you'll have a niggle elsewhere. And that's what I sort of struggled with. So as much as I did play at a relatively young age, I never felt pressured, if I'm being totally honest, at a young age because I was doing something that I enjoyed, something that I loved. And I mean, I had the foresight to think, well, look, my vision is just to try and do as well as what I can. As much as I really appreciated the fans and, what they did and what they went through to get to games, I mean, I was totally sort of focused on what I needed to do. So, I mean, to be, I think, a great sportsman, I think you can have that tunnel vision where you can just sort of focus only on what you've got to do. And what you need to do, and then maybe put everything aside. Maybe when I got a little bit older, I struggled at that. But look, it was a case of, look, I'm doing something that what I love, and I can never come out and say I'm depressed or I hate doing what I'm doing because I always thought, well, lots of people will give everything to be where I am. So I never sort of come out and said anything sort of adversely wrong because I felt people would have held that against me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, Robbie. If you've just switched on or you've just joined us, we're talking about mental health in sport today. My name is Dan Walker. I'm the host today. You've just heard from Robbie Fowler. We've also heard from Dame Kelly Holmes. This is an event being hosted by the World Innovation Summit for Health. That's WISH, which is the Qatar Foundation's global health initiative. We've also got with us today Wasim Akram, great Pakistani cricketer. Lovely to have you with us today as well. I think, interestingly, we've heard from Dame Kelly Holmes, Wasim, who was a great individual in her sport. Both you and Robbie played in team sports. I wonder, when you cast your mind back to the start of your career, how would you judge your mental health at that stage? Did you think you were a mentally healthy young athlete then?
My story is slightly different than Dame Kelly and Mr. Flower. I've come from a very humble background. And I kind of had no one to mentor me about life. I had two elder brothers, but they were like doing their own thing. And my dad was a very simple, honest guy who worked in the morning, came back in the evening. And my mom probably went to school till class 8. She got married when she was 16 years old, she tells me now. And I got picked up for Pakistan team by fluke. I was 17 years of age. And all these cricketers, I had posters of them in my room as a young kid. Javed Miandad, the great Imran Khan, who's a prime minister right now. Within 2 years, I was playing with them. So that was a massive step for me. It was a dream come true for me. So the first 4 years, from 17 till 21, 22, I was enjoying life. Like Robbie said, he was, focused, tunnel vision. The sport you love, you're playing for your country, coming from very humble backgrounds. And but after that, patience started coming towards me from when I became a top player in the world in 1989-90. But in the beginning, what helped me a lot when I was 17, my senior players, my captain Imran Khan, Javed Miandad, Nazar, they were my mentors. They were guiding me what to do, how to work hard, because I didn't know anything. My first tour was outside of Pakistan, was New Zealand. I'd never been abroad before in my life. I didn't know what steak was. I didn't know how to hold the knife and fork at the time. So it was my captain who taught me, okay, in Christchurch in 85, I was looking for a curry. Obviously, there was no curry there. So he taught me what is steak, what are chips, and salad. And from there onwards, when the expectations started getting high from the country and when these mentors kind of retired, and disappeared. I became captain then when I was 24. Never captained anything before in my life, under 19 or club cricket or school cricket or first class cricket. They made me captain of Pakistan team, and we have cricket mad country. There's only one sport in England. In Australia, you have different kind of sports: hockey, football, rugby, golf, tennis. We only have cricket now. Cricket is in our veins as a Pakistani. So I became captain at 24, and then I think obviously my first tour was West Indies. We did okay, and then after that tour, obviously I was learning how to lead a side, especially a team sport. Every individual is so different. You have to know. Eventually, I realized that you have to deal every individual according to their mindset, not what you want from them. And then when we came back from West Indies in '93, the whole team, 11 of them, rebelled against me. So that was a dark time for me. They said we're not going to play under Wasim Akram, and if he be the captain, we are not going. So obviously, I had to step down. And in '93, '94, there were no sports psychologists, no, especially the culture we come from. I mean, now it's a lot more. It's a lot more awareness involved now in that culture, mental health in sport. But when I was 24 years old, I was lost. I mean, my late wife, Huma, was a psychologist. She studied from UCL London, so she helped me a lot. So, my captain at the time, ex-captain Imran Khan, told me not to go on the tour. I said, look, Skipper, I still call him Skipper, although he's a prime minister. But I said, Skipper, the idea is that these guys probably don't want me to play cricket. So I want to play cricket. I'll go on the tour. So against state advice, I listened to my wife and I went on the tour. And I became man of the matches, man of the series. But it was a very tough time for me as 24-year-old guy. And I struggled a lot on my own. There was no one to talk to apart from my wife. I wasn't talking to anyone on tour. I was just getting wickets and not even doing high fives. So imagine what I've been through playing 11, but not talking to anyone for the whole month and a half. So yes, those were very tough times. But all of us as ex-sportsmen, or when we were young, we were mentally very strong. And especially, like I mentioned, the culture I come from, we Pakistanis come from, the mental health is right bottom of the ladder. We don't even talk about it. It's probably taboo. And in '94, there was nothing. So it was very tough road for me, but eventually I kind of jumped back. But it took me 2 years to come back mentally to be okay. But it was tough road.
Well, can I first of all say thank you to all three of you for being so honest with us about your own careers and some of the things that you've been through already. We've got loads of questions coming in. Before we get to some of those questions, I'd like to just bring in Dr. Claudia Reardon as well, who I know has been listening in. I've been watching you nodding along to what you've heard from Dame Kelly, Robbie and Wasim as well. Does some of that, what you've heard, Claudia, does it resonate with some of your other conversations with athletes, some of those people that you work with?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. And thanks hugely to our athletes who are sharing their stories today. Nothing I can possibly say will make a bit of a difference if we don't hear from athletes themselves. And that's really what promises to demystify mental illness and to destigmatize it. And your stories are so painfully familiar to me as I sit in my office and now my virtual office with patients all day and hear these stories of it being so difficult to be able to come forward and share your symptoms and your struggles, and to be able to say, I'm struggling with mental health. So much more comfort and less stigma with saying, I'm struggling with injuries. Can you help me with these kinds of physical injuries that I'm having and not mental health problems? And so, in some sense, we're kind of entering the golden age, or slightly in the golden age of mental health, with less stigma over recent years. And that does extend into sport, but still sport is one of those final frontiers where there's this culture of toughness. And it is really hard, to have on that game face on the field, and then to step off the field and to be able to say, hey, wait a second, actually something is wrong here. I don't feel quite right. And I do need to and want to reach out for help. And I heard themes in your stories about the sense of almost being trapped in your situation, like Dame Kelly was sharing, with needing to almost reach for desperate measures like the self-harm, looking for some way to get relief when there's so much external and internal pressure to continue to play and perform and to meet those, lifelong goals that you've had for yourself since you were 5 or 10 or 14 or whatever it was. And that's such a core integral part of your identity. And it's really hard to step outside of that and say, okay, I need to pause and figure out how I can feel better. So yes, all of these stories painfully do resonate with what I hear day in and day out.
Well, the good news is we've got so many questions coming in, and there are people. I know it's very strange for all of us to be sat in front of our computer screens and just feeling like we're having a chat with each other, but there are so many people watching all over the world. Thank you to Shivi, to Lara, to Sabahat, to Robert, to Sally, to Farwa, to Saeed, and many more who are sending in questions. Let's start with this one for you, Dame Kelly, if we can. This is from Shivi, who's sent this in on Instagram. Question is, what advice would you give to sports people to recover mentally after a setback? And there's quite a few other people, Dame Kelly, who are sort of broadening that out and outside of sport as well, and generally recovery from something that goes wrong. How do you mentally recover from that yourself and come out the other side?
I think when I was a sports person, it was all about having that achievement and sense of identity and feeling like I, as a person, had achieved something in life. And that was always my inner dilemma almost, from growing up, not necessarily having an identity, not knowing who I was and not being academic at school, having the hope of, being successful at something, which was athletics and in the army at the time, drove me to have that tunnel vision about what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And having an element of success in junior international sport. I was a junior international athlete, winning a mini youth Olympics when I was 17, then given up to go into the military. And then during my military career, halfway through, getting back into international athletics while marrying a full-time, being a soldier full-time. I always had this kind of inner need to show that I could be who I wanted to be. And I think when the biggest impact of my life came, on reflection now, it was almost just that turmoil of thinking that if I don't achieve my dream, I'm not anybody. And that's an inner feeling as opposed to external pressures. There are obviously external pressures when you achieve something anyway and you're, one of the best in the world. Everyone expects you to do something again and again and again. But I had that inner turmoil. So the way that I dealt with things was almost that I've lived a life of knowing where I've come from. So how I dealt with that situation in particular, and of course I'm sure we'll go on to what's happened post that, 16 years to right now, me winning my Olympic titles. But I think how I dealt with it, managed it, was I'd always look at where I had got to and what I'd achieved in the past to give me that sense of hope and knowledge that I could do it if I kept my body injury free. So I had to learn to adapt. I ran around the track as fast as I can, but I always had in my head the rest of my body is still able to do something. So if I was injured with a lower body injury, I've got to keep the cardio up, I've got to keep my strength up. So what I ended up doing is realizing that if I know that I can still train as an athlete, so I can still train no matter what injury I had, that actually really helped me. So I was able to adapt my training in a pool, doing aqua jogging, going on a bike, a step or a rower, doing weight training. So that, in a sense, kept my mental focus strong, whilst I was adapting the physical elements. And that almost was the power of success, because I knew how to run. You know how to play cricket, you know how to play football, whether your body allows you to do it right at the top. So I've just learned how to appreciate where I'm at and the ability that I have, learn how to deal with the situation that I'm in at that time and still keep the vision alive, because I've always had that thing, if only is too late. And if I'd never tried, that would have been worse on me. And I think sometimes people have to realise that, you know, where you've come from is always gains, and actually injuries are a learning curve. You know, you don't know why you get an injury. You try and adapt when you come out of an injury. Remember, I had 7 years of injury problems, like really bad injuries. Yet during that 7 years, I still won 5 international medals because I learned to adapt. So it's almost the power of adaptation is probably my biggest kind of comment I would give to that. And then also, we weren't in an era back in the 90s or early 2000s where you could openly talk to someone because of that worry that you become weak, you know, and if your opposition know that you're not mentally strong, that weakness is a real kind of hard thing to deal with. I didn't want people to think I was weak because I wasn't. You know, I was a strong female character with an ambition, but something in my head was just letting me down, and that was my body. So it was kind of that transition. How do I tell people I need help? I never once said I need help here. I always say keep me injury free, you know, because I'm injury free, I can do this. And that's what happened in 2004. So it's just the power of adaptation and realizing where you can get to, and then not giving up on that absolute focus allowed me to drive through a real dark time. But it's also very hard to do that as an individual. You know, you do need people around you, you need people and that's almost what I had: physio, training partner, people that I trusted to help me achieve my dream.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear that sort of internal dialogue that's going on in your head as you're dealing with those injuries. Hopefully, Shivi, that's answered your question. Robbie, one for you here from Lara. Talking about, I think, the mental health impact on your family. I know that Wasim touched on this with his family, but around elite footballers, there's always that, obviously, that family, Robbie. And for you, did you ever feel there was pressure on you that rubbed off on them, and did they feel that? And was that part of what you had to deal with?
Yes, I think it probably has. I mean, it's not, if I'm being totally honest, it's not something that I've sat down with them and asked them, just because, you know, in all fairness, I'm probably scared about what people say. Again, I was focused on what I was doing. So, you know, I was that one-dimensional where, you know, if I have bad games and you know, people are, you know, saying negative things, then of course I think my family are going to get upset. In fact, they're going to get probably more upset than what I have. I mean, I spoke before about, you know, myself going to games and obviously not playing, and you know, it's interesting that what Kelly's saying and obviously what Wasim, we're obviously team players, as you said, and I think we go in there, and as much as we don't really have control about how the team plays, but as obviously Dame Kelly can control how she, you know, how she does things within the athletics, or you know, what she can do. Whereas we're maybe governed by, you know, what the team does as well. So regardless of if we play, you know, okay as a single teammate, if the team gets beat, I think we can still get a little bit of an adverse stick from, you know, the various people. And that's where the family, you know, element does come into it, because, you know, regardless if I'm playing well and I'm scoring goals, you know, the team gets beat, you know, I'm sort of going to get labelled and targeted with the rest of my team. And, you know, there's been times where, certainly now with social media and you know, obviously I've not played for a long time, but you know, still people bring up games now, and you know, they mention horrible things to my kids on social media, you know, something about what's happened, you know, 10, 15 years ago. So this is why I think it's important from a, you know, from a mental point from myself is, I mean, this is why I don't really go out there, and I'm quite a secretive person, in all honesty. You know, not really many people know about myself, my family, or, you know, what I do on the outside, because I don't think people really need to know. And the more I'm on social media, I think it's more of a free will, if you like, for people to sort of have a go at me. And really, I want to keep my family away from that. You know, I don't post pictures of, you know, my wife, I don't post pictures of my kids, because, you know, I don't really want people to sort of come at them. So I'm you know, my kids sort of say to me, well, why don't you put a picture of us on? And it's not me being an horrible dad or an horrible parent. It's me being respectful for them, because I don't want people to come at them. You know, I don't want people to say horrible things to them about me. So it is a little bit of a weird situation, but it's something, again, you know, I mean, Kelly was saying there about, you know, adapting. And I think this is probably what we've always done as sports people. We've learned to adapt to, you know, environments, you know, to society around us and various other things.
Okay, thank you for that, Robin. Again, thank you for your honesty in answering that. There's a question here from another doctor for you, Mr. Akram. Dr. Arslan Zamir says, many cricket fans would be oblivious to your diabetes. He says, how did you balance control of that long-term condition and at the same time trying to produce elite performances on the pitch?
I got diagnosed when I was 29 years of age. I was the fittest athlete in my individual sport, cricket. Top of my game. 29 as a bowler, you really reach the height. And suddenly I started losing weight. I was becoming thinner. I was going to the loo a lot at night or during the day. I was thirsty all the time. I was hungry. And I didn't know what was happening. And I thought I was getting fit. I was training a bit, training as well in between. And my dad came up to me and he said, "Why don't you have your blood sugar test?" I said, "What's that?" I had no idea what blood sugar was. I had no idea what diabetes were. And then he took me to the lab, and then my blood sugar level came back. There was 500. Normal is 100, I suppose. And obviously, that was a massive shock to me as a person and to my family, especially my wife, Huma. Um, and then my first question was to the doctor was, will I be able to play cricket? Because I didn't know anything about diabetes. And he said, as long as you control your sugar levels. And I said, what's that? Then he had to explain me everything. It took me about 3 months to come out of that depression, when I got diagnosed. And then again, I have one thing I think it is a God given, or probably I've learned over time, that I'm mentally very strong. I always think positive about myself and about people around me, about anybody else. I want to be positive and happy kind of a guy. And it took me 3 months to come out South Africa with Pakistan team, and it was tough. Injecting those 997, though you used to carry a vial with you, and then injection needles are about that big at the time. Now it's about now technologies, ahead, leaps and bounds. So my sugar level used to go down in between. So I've learned myself when to have a less insulin before meal, before lunch, and if I have to bowl, that means less insulin units. So I've learned. It took me about 3 years to actually uh, uh, get back on a path, mentally more than physically. But again, I always think that it's my own battle. Everything is, I don't have to blame people about everything. It's my battle. I have to fight it out and make sure that I'm positive. So I played cricket with it for 8 years professional for Pakistan, got about 150 wickets in test matches, one days. But again, when there's a will, there's a way. So it has been 23 years that I'm a diabetic. I take 3 jabs a day and I lead a very healthy kind of life. I think it was blessing in disguise. If I wasn't a diabetic, I probably would have been a fat guy just sitting around doing commentary. So now I'm more careful about what I eat, what sort of food I eat, more aware of diabetes and all the technology, all the. I read a lot on the disease itself, and I'm also global ambassador for one of the biggest companies in the world. One is Roche, and one is Novo Nordisk. And I do meet a lot of diabetics worldwide, especially subcontinent. Over there in Pakistan, we have about 33 million known diabetics because of type 2 is about lifestyle, and type 1 you can't help, you have it, it's more from up there. So I try to be a role model to the diabetics worldwide. And I suppose, like I said early on, I don't want to blame anyone else or to God that because of him I got diabetic, so I'm going to let it go. It's there. I have to fight my own battle.
Yeah, well, can I say, as a cricket fan, it was wonderful to see you in your physical peak when you were charging in, but you look great still, Awazim. So it's lovely to be talking to you today. And also, Dr. Claudia, we've got 3, very different personalities here who excel. I wonder, and this touches on some of the questions we've been getting, do you feel that top level athletes or performers, are there certain personality traits that they tend to share, do you think?
Yeah, that's a common question that we hear. So is there a certain type of personality that tends to go into sport or that's successful in sport? And then how does that relate to mental health challenges? And, are those certain personality types in sport more likely or less likely to have mental health challenges? Well, step back, big picture, you know, are people in sport in general more likely to suffer mental health symptoms and disorders compared to the general population? And it's a question that the International Olympic Committee work group on mental health and elite athletes really has dove into in terms of looking at the world's research. We know that the public's perception, and this relates to some of the stigma, is that athletes are relatively immune to mental health struggles. They live this glamorous, wonderful, lovely life. They're physically strong, they're beautiful, confident, etc. on the outside, so they couldn't possibly be suffering on the inside, right? And I can tell you nothing makes me more upset than that sentiment, because I wish it were true, but it's so painfully not true, as our athletes here today and any athletes in the audience, you know, are just painfully aware. And when we looked at the world's research, that confirms, unsurprisingly, that finding. So athletes are just as likely as everyone else to suffer from depression, to suffer from anxiety, all kinds of anxiety disorders. And in fact, actually, there are several mental health conditions that athletes are disproportionately more likely to suffer from. So things like eating disorders for sure, post-traumatic stress disorder as a form of anxiety, certain substance use disorders, certain sleep disorders, and several more that I won't even go into. So, you know, they're not immune. And then the question is, you know, what kind of personality features might, you know, make them susceptible to these conditions, some of them even more susceptible than non-athletes. And there is no one personality type in sport. There are certain, you know, types or personality features that may be more likely on average, but when this has been studied, people are different across sports, and there's some differences in individual sport athletes versus team sports, for example. But I think a couple of themes are common. So things like perfectionism is a really, that's a fine line, you know, so what, you know, wanting to work your absolute hardest, put 110% into everything you do involved in sport. But it is a fine line in terms of crossing over into anxiety and compulsiveness. And, you know, where does attention to detail with your diet become an eating disorder? In so many other ways too. And the competitiveness, just that competitive spirit is a, you know, a personality feature, I think, that is, you know, by definition seen, and that is generally helpful. But when it comes to being able to, like I alluded to earlier, step back and acknowledge that I am not feeling 100% right, something is wrong here, that can be in conflict with that underlying competitive tendency. And so that can allow the mental health symptoms or disorders to go on longer than they otherwise would without the necessary treatment.
Really interesting. Thank you for that, Dr. Claudia. I should say, if you are watching this or just joining us, this is an event hosted by the World Innovation Summit for Health, WISH, which is the Qatar Foundation's global health initiative. Lovely to have you with us. We've got Dame Kelly Holmes, Wasim Akram, Robbie Fowler, and Dr. Claudia Reardon with us today, talking about mental health and sport and the challenges that our elite athletes here have faced. Can I ask you all, guys, your questions have been brilliant so far. Your answers have been brilliant so far. If we could try and keep the answers as brief as possible, because we've got so many questions coming in from all over the world. Kelly, this one is for you from Sally, who is watching in Birmingham. Hello, Sally, and everyone else who sent in questions. This is I don't know how deep you want to go here, Kelly, but Sally says she saw a post on Instagram of you talking about self-harming after your mum died 3 years ago. Do you think that you ever properly recover from the stresses that were put on you, your mind, your body when you were competing?
I feel that having the first breakdown that I had definitely changed something in me as a person, because I'd always thought I was just, you know, personally invincible, but not against other people, but, you know, that kind of willingness to keep fighting. And then I think over the years since retiring, I went through many sort of ups and downs of losing that identity again that I'd always strove for, because of not knowing where I was. And then I think having that breakdown, I believe you become a bit more susceptible to having those downs when things go tough or you're struggling because you've been there before. And then when my mum passed away, was the worst day of my life out of anything I've done myself. And that was also the last day that I self-harmed 3 years ago. because I realised it wouldn't take her back and it wouldn't give me control over who I am, because I was actually out of control by self-harming, and I wanted to gain control of who I was and my life. I feel that you learn to adapt about who you are and what you want to become, and sport put added pressure on me, wanting just to achieve a dream and a goal. But now I feel that by self-harming, being out of control is something I always wanted to gain control. I always wanted to be the best. So actually by self-harming, I'm losing control. And that was definitely a mindset piece around how do you take that kind of element of your life back. And I can control my actions. I can still feel down, I can still feel low. And the reason, and what has helped me, first of all, and I must say, you know, with mental health problems, and obviously Dr. Claudia's Bella says for this, but talk therapy and exercise have been two things that I've always really felt that were really important to me. And when I went through my mental health problem on my own, I never spoke to anyone. Not one person knew what I was going through at all until it came out of my autobiography. And I absolutely guaranteed to my friends who really struggled with the knowledge that I'd dealt with at my own, that the moment I needed them, I would ask for their help. And I really needed them when my mum passed away. I became very reclusive for 3 weeks until she was, we had a burial, and that helped me learn to deal with it. You know, we're not superhuman. Sorry, I know this is meant to be a short answer. I just realised I wanted it on. But, you know, I think the first thing I'd say is that I've always realised now that when I'm struggling, I ask somebody's help. I'm willing to talk to people. And actually me opening up to people has helped me deal with my life. Knowing that we're not all out there, we can't be anything that we are more than we are. We can't be anything more than we strive to be. We can't be perfect. And understanding that, and just knowing that, you know, going through something hard could actually make you better. You know, going through life's journeys can actually change your mindset into fighting for other things you want. And having had the mental health problems is actually probably one of the greatest successes that I've ever had, to learn to deal with it and to be able to talk about it openly to help other people.
And Dame Kelly, it does help other people. I know you know that, and you've had lots of personal accounts of people who said it has been helpful to hear you talking about that. I just want to quickly come to Claudia on that issue, because I'm sure, even though we're having this discussion now, and athletes and famous faces are far more willing now to talk about some other things they struggle with and not see it as weakness, there will still be some people watching this, or who will watch this in the future, who are out there now who feel, as Kelly did, that they can't speak to anybody about what they're going through. And it's so important to reach those people, isn't it?
Yeah. The stigma is still real. We've made some progress, but it's not, you know, a total non-issue yet. And I think, you know, people can think about and realize and appreciate that if mental health symptoms go on untreated, if you continue to be significantly anxious or depressed, etc., your sports performance will suffer. We know that for sure. And I think that can be a compelling thing for athletes to realize that, hey, you know, this isn't just something that's going to make me feel better, but actually this thing that I really care about is going to improve too.
Robert, here's a question from Mike, which is coming for you. Talk about, I suppose, low points in your career. He says, what was it like watching the World Cup in 1998 as a spectator through injury? I mean, I don't know if Mike's a Liverpool fan when he says, you clearly should have been there playing. What was that like for you from a mental health point of view?
Yeah, well, I think he obviously is a Liverpool fan, Dan, isn't he, really? Yeah, look, I mean, you mentioned at the start, I mean, I came into football relatively young age, scored lots of goals from a young age. And then obviously got injured. So when I was, I think it was 23, actually, it was a World Cup, 98. I actually done all the ligaments in my knee, my cruciate, you know, all my medial ligaments, my meniscus and everything. That's actually snapped it. Going in for a challenge with a goalkeeper. Really unorthodox fall, just, you know, straight in my knee, and my knee just crumbled underneath me. And I remember coming round from the operation, actually, and, you know, lying down in bed, my knee was in a brace. Like, sounds a little bit horrible, actually, but it was like a hole in my knee where obviously the surgeon obviously you couldn't close. And that was probably the first time I thought, well, you know, I'm going to struggle here. I was in the midst of talking about a new contract as well at Liverpool, you know, maybe sign a long-term contract. And that was obviously when I come round and I see my knee, and I just thought, well, my career's over. So, you know, the World Cup was far from my mind because I wasn't interested. It was more interested in my career and whatnot. But obviously, once, you know, you're trying to recover and, you know, when trying to get fit, you're missing out on the World Cup. I mean, it's horrible because, you know, certainly as a football player, you know, there's I mean, you got the European Championship, the World Cup, which are pinnacle tournaments for any professional to play in. Now, obviously, I've been to a World Cup, I've been to a European Championship, but I missed out on so many because I've had, you know, so many injuries. And that's one of the things I really couldn't get my head around. The fact that, you know, I worked so hard, and then all of a sudden, you know, you go into a bad challenge, and then effectively your career could be over. So yeah, it is a nightmare. And I actually went to the 2002 World Cup with an injury. You know, only because I felt, I mean, I probably wasn't 100%, but because I missed the World Cup in '98, I just felt, well, I don't want to miss it again. So I probably didn't do myself any favours because I played 30 minutes in the World Cup. So I can always look back in my career and think I have played in the World Cup. But I probably didn't do myself justice because I went into the tournament with an injury and I didn't really want to tell anyone. A little bit selfish, you know, granted, and I know that, but because I'd missed the last one, because I'd missed the European Championships as well, you know, this is what you want to do as a player, you know, and missing out these pinnacle tournaments is the worst thing in anyone's career. It really is. I mean, Wasim and obviously Dame Kelly will tell you that you work ever so hard to get to the top of your game, and one little injury can more or less stop your life. And it sounds absurd, that, but you know, work hard to try and get to where you want to be, and all of a sudden, you know, it can't happen. So yeah, it is tough. It really is, because you want to play at the world stage.
I think Wasim, you wanted to come in. I saw you raise your hand. I don't know whether it was about Robbie or what you heard from Claudia or Kelly.
No, it's about the lowest point of your career, I suppose. You know, apart from what I mentioned a little while ago, when players, all my good buddies, they rebelled against me. They were with me night before at my place for a dinner. And then the second time it happened in my career was 1999. I was the captain. The World Cup was in England, and we qualified. I never spoken about this in public before, ever. This is the first time I'm coming out with it. It probably will be big news back home, but it has to be said. But so 99 World Cup, we qualified for the finals at Lord's against Australia. And I'm not going into the detail of it because we need short answers. So we lost the finals badly. Australia won the finals. So my country, half of my countrymen thought the match was fixed. How can people think that a World Cup final, somebody, a captain of a team, can be fixed? It still is a dilemma. It still is, people talk about it. And I just want to tell those people, common sense, use common sense. First of all, you're proud to represent your country in the World Cup, and then you're captaining the side, and then you're qualifying for the finals. You work all your life for, and then thinking that it was fixed because we lost one-sided game. It still haunts me, by the way. I've never spoken about it, but it's very tough when people come up with it in my country and they talk about it, especially like Robbie said, social media. You know, with social media, the plus, what I've learned from social media, you can tell a person with one line that what sort of person that individual is, either he or she. One line she or she writes on the social media, you can tell what sort of personality he is. I really don't care about them anymore. Moved on with social media.
I'm glad you're able to do that. It's a really important mindset to have. But just to go back to that World Cup final, it obviously still hurts and still affects you. Is it the fact that people felt that it was, you know, that you've been bought in that sense, or was it because you didn't play well when it really mattered? What is it that sort of affects you now, looking back?
I was the most disappointed individual in the whole 200 million people back home. I was the captain of the side. In the whole World Cup in '99, we won the toss. Our strength was bowling. So it means when you win a toss, you bat first, you defend your runs. So in the World Cup final, it was a team meeting. Everybody decided, yes, we win the toss, we'll bat. And that's what happened. We got bundled out for 130 odd. And Australia got runs 1 wicket down just before lunch. So probably that was the disappointing factor for them and for me too. But, you know, in your part of the world, sport, you guys play well. If you lose, You get criticized for a couple of days and you guys move on quickly. In our part of the world, they don't move on. They just don't move on. They just stay. I mean, they stick to it for like 2 decades. I don't know what's wrong with us in that aspect.
Well, that actually touches on one of the questions we've had in, talking about how, as a national team, you talked about a sort of lack of mental health professionals with regards to that. Sabahat says, why do you think one hasn't been appointed yet for the Pakistan national cricket team? And would that help, do you think, going forward?
Of course, it would help, but it's not part of our culture. You know, when Pakistanis ask me why it's not with the team, how many Pakistanis sees a psychologist or psychiatric? None, probably 1.1%. Players mostly come from humble backgrounds. They don't even know what mental person is or what psychiatric is, who psychologist. So, you know, when writing something on social media or even question, think what are you writing and what backgrounds they come from. But yes, if there is any consultant with them, it will help. But for that, players have to accept that they need help, I suppose, to start off with.
Claudia, to come to you on that, I mean, Wazir's been really honest there about that World Cup final and how that has hurt him and upset him over the years. You must have to speak with quite a few sportsmen and women who are in that same sort of situation. They have something that it's hard for them to get over, either because they're accused of doing something that they haven't, or they haven't quite produced what they really needed and spent their life training for.
Yeah, it is painfully common and really is experienced by athletes understandably as a trauma. It's a traumatic event. You know, we think of traumas as things like, you know, big bad abuse or major, you know, accidents outside of sport. But these kinds of things within sport, when sport is your livelihood, your life, and your identity, that's a trauma. And that leads to understandably mental health symptoms like anxiety, like post-traumatic stress symptoms, like depression. And they do have to be worked through because, you know, simply putting them in a separate part of your brain, compartmentalizing them, if you will, is not going to be a sustainable way to address that, right? And it might get you through a single game or a single practice, but really that is going to fester there.
I've got a question which is coming from quite a few different people, and I'd like to come to all of you on this. Dame Kelly, we'll start with you. What would be the advice that you would give your younger self now, having learned what you've learned from your career, but also coming out the other side of that career? Dame Kelly. Oh, Dame Kelly, I don't think we can hear you. I think you might have muted. There you go.
Yeah,
far away.
Sorry about that. I'd probably just say the same as what I've kind of taught myself over the years, that, you know, when you want something bad enough, it's also down to you to kind of apply yourself in the right direction, you know, never giving up on something as well, you know. So ultimately, yes, you can put external pressures on yourself, you can kind of, you go through a journey, and I'd probably say to myself, the journey is almost a learning curve. You know, people I've seen talk about failure. Failure is only failure if by that perceived failure and not kind of then making something change in the way that you do something and trying again. You know, if I'd every time I'd lost a race because I'd only just come back of injury, I'd never ever have done what I did, you know. And I'd probably say to myself that, you know, you learn your journey yourself. You go through the highs and lows because it's teaching you something, you know. And I know that if I'd given up, I'd never won 2 gold medals, but I refused to give up no matter what was happening. So I'd always say, firstly, be able to talk more to people around you when you need support, not just physically, but mentally when you're struggling. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wanting to be good. You know, you want to be good, so you're asking people to help you. And as a young person, I would definitely say to people, having mentored a lot of young people, that at any stage you feel you need support in whatever part of your life, you have to have that inner strength to ask for it, because it's only because you want to be better.
It's really fascinating insight, Dame Kelly. Thank you for that. And Robbie, what about for you? I know you burst on the scene as a very young man scoring goals for Liverpool, but what would you tell yourself now?
I think quite simply, Dan. I think it's a case of, look, I played as well as anyone, I trained as well as anyone, but I probably went out a little bit too much. So I went out drinking. I said before about to society when I came in, football was a drinking culture, whereas we went out and we socialised and we probably drank too much. And one of the things that it kills me to this day is I remember having a conversation with my dad. And my dad's obviously, he's passed now. He's passed 3 years ago. But when just before he died, we were talking about my career, and he said, you know what, son? He said, you've had a good career. He said, but you'd have had a better career if you didn't drink as much. And that killed me, if I'm being totally honest. But yeah, I think if I was to go back and revisit my former self or myself as a young kid, would be, I think just quite simply just go out there and train and play, but just try and stay away from the drink. Now, I'm not alcoholic but by any means, but I went out because that was what we did. That was what we did as a football team. Now, if I could go back and change anything, it would be that. Just don't drink. Basically, just go and do what I need to do. I've just mentioned about playing and training as well as anyone. But when I went out, I went out.
Robbie, was that part of a release though, because there was so much pressure on you as a young man to be a role model for others? Do you think?
Dan, you know what? Maybe it was. I mean, I'm one of these who always wanted to be liked. I wanted to be, the centre of attention. I wanted to be, with everyone else, and I wanted to be in the middle of everything. And yeah, I suppose it probably was. I mean, one of the things I get accused of, even when I was playing, was doing drugs. I'm very, very anti-drugs, and even now, where I'm scared to go to a toilet in a restaurant. I'm scared to go to a toilet in a bar because I think people think the wrong thing of me. So that's bad. The fact is, I'm mid-40s and I'm struggling to go to the toilet because I'm worried about what people think of me. So yeah, I suppose it is. I suppose it was a release, yeah, and maybe it was just getting me what I thought was normal.
It's a bit like what Wasim was saying, wasn't it, about the fact that there's that misconception, as it was for him with the World Cup final, that misconception of the person that you were, which is obviously now still, is it fair to say it still eats away at you, the fact that people said that you were a drug taker when you never did?
You know what, every single day, Dan, and again, we've spoken about social media, and this is why I'm thinking about coming off it, because I still, there's not a day that goes by where I don't get accused of doing something that I haven't done. Now, for a sportsman to be where I was, and now, Wasim say, we worked hard to get to, World Cup finals, to get to, to various, places in sport. Now, I had obviously problems with drugs in my family, so I knew that I was very, very anti-drugs. And then all of a sudden, people were saying, "Oh, well, you do this, you do that," and I know myself, I never. But there's only so many times you can say that, and I suppose if I come out and said I wasn't drugs, I might have got support. But the fact is, I keep coming out and defending myself. People go the other way, go the opposite way, and try to give me a little bit more stick, which is wrong. So hence probably the need to come off social media.
It can be good for your mental health, that, Robbie. And Wasim, what about yourself? What would you tell a young Wasim Akram?
I would tell young Wasim Akram one thing. Choose your friends very carefully, because they can make and break your reputation. Because you spend time with them day in, day out, you go on a tour, they can say whatever they want behind your back, and people will believe them because they know that they're their close friends. So choose your friends very carefully, Wasim.
Well, that is wise advice for everybody watching as well. Thank you for that. And Dr. Claudia, just to come to you as well, I heard something. I don't know if you know, there's a comedian in the UK called Jason Manford, who's very popular here, and I heard something from him talking about some of the mental health struggles that he's had and advice that was given to him, which I think is really pertinent, sort of cuts through a lot of what we're talking about. He said, my advice to anybody who has mental health issues is to know that struggling is not failing. We've heard from 3 people who are brilliant in their own careers and have achieved great things, and yet they've all had their struggles, haven't they? They've all had to work through that and come through that, and yet that struggle doesn't mean they've failed. That struggle is part of that journey to get to where they have been and are going.
Absolutely. You know, mental illnesses are real and they're treatable. And I just hope and aspire for us to all get to a place where treatment for these kinds of symptoms and disorders is just as accessible as treatment for any other mental health conditions.
There you go. Sorry, I'm back. Can I say a huge thank you to all of you for being with us? Thank you to Dr. Claudia Reardon, to Robbie Fowler, to Wasim Akram, and to Dame Kelly Holmes. I'm sure you'll agree they have been fantastic. It's been great to hear their insights and their really open and honest assessment of what they have done in their career and the things that they have struggled with at times and how they've come out the other side of those. And thank you so much as well for all your questions and for watching and your interaction as well. You've been watching an event hosted by the World Innovation Summit for Health, which is called WISH. There's plenty more about that online if you'd like to know more about it. And that's the Qatar Foundation's Global Health Initiative. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Thanks for all your questions. Stay safe and we'll see you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.